Hey, everyone, and welcome to this show that I have not come up with a name yet. It's a work in progress, but maybe we'll find it at the end of this episode. In this first episode, I'm joined by...
Taylor Tuntland, someone you kind of went to school with.
I have no idea how this is going to go. This is just...
Our fearless leader has no idea how this is going to go.
A fearful leader, I think, is a more apt description of who I am. I'm afraid of everything at all times, so...
You're what Yoda accuses Anakin of being in The Phantom Menace. He's like, you dorky little child, you're a coward, you're going to be an awful Jedi.
Does that make you Yoda, though, in this situation?
No, I think I'm definitely like Mace Windu, just kind of being catty in the corner. I think this kid sucks.
You think
I don't care about his midichlorians. That's like all that Mace does in episode 1, and it's great.
I haven't seen episode 1 in so long.
I saw it twice in one weekend.
What? Recently or
yeah, when it was in theaters for the anniversary. I saw it once with one of my friends, and then I saw it again with two of my other friends. And I was kind of disassociating a little bit the second time, because at that point, that was the second time that I had seen Jar Jar Binks say "pity hot" in like 3 days.
Yeah.
Jar Jar's such a fuck up in that movie. I forgot how bad of a fuck up he is.
Yeah. He just kind of stumbles his way through.
Into like every situation, like throwing his hand into, I guess I don't know what it is, fake fan alert. I've only seen these movies 400 times and I don't know what any of the text's called. But like when he's like helping Anakin fix his pod racer and he just like shoves his hand into the reactor. No, he doesn't shove his hand. He avoids putting his hand in it, which is what Anakin warns him about. But he gets his tongue in it. And so he's just like, and it's, he's awful the whole movie. And yet I'm like, I kind of get it. As I get older, I am that Gungan.
You're gonna turn into Jar Jar one day.
Yeah, Misa Bombad, Misa Bombad filmmaker.
Well, So, you're a Star Wars fan, I'm guessing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I qualify because I am unfortunately a big prequels fan, which now is becoming socially acceptable.
Weirdly enough, I think.
I think that Star Wars is like SNL. And that's whatever you grew up with is what's okay to like. So like when I talk to my mom about SNL, she's like, oh yeah, SNL hasn't been good since 1987. And that's because that's when she graduated high school.
Right.
To me, it hasn't been good since... When did I graduate high school? I don't think I was watching that much. Whatever. Like, it hasn't been good since the late 2000s. And it's not because it's, like, objectively... Like, yeah, I think there's high points and there's some things that are better than others. Like, Revenge of the Sith is an actually good movie. Battle of the Clones is dog shit. But I love that movie. You know what I mean? That, like, I was a kid watching those. So those are my movies. And, like, because those are my movies, when I first saw the prequel... Or the sequels, which was considerably after they came out... I was like, these are just bad. And, like, on a technical level, I do think they're bad. Like, from a screenwriting perspective... They're a mess. Like, I don't have to, like, detail this too much because, like, that's completely beating a dead flesh horse. What are those things called?
A dead flesh horse?
In Star Wars, they have the horses that, like, early, like...
Horses? Star Wars horses?
Star Wars horses, they have them on Tatooine. They are human skin colored and they don't have any hair. And one of them, like, rips ass at Jar Jar and it's disgusting.
What the fuck? I don't remember this.
Actually, I'm not going to show you what they look like. I could be making anything up.
You could just lie to me. That's also very possible.
I one time convinced a girl that there's a man in the Bible, specifically in the New Testament, because she went to Jewish day school, that was called King Gilbert. And it took a bit for her to be like, are you fucking with me? And I was like, yep, sorry.
King Gilbert.
King Gilbert.
What was the backstory for King Gilbert, if I may ask?
I think he was from Nazareth and he was like disenfranchised by his like the new leaders. I don't really know. I didn't get that far.
You didn't think about the war.
No, because I just like, it was an impulse thing. Like, I think I make up misinformation all the time, and I think it's obvious that I'm joking, and it's not because I say it the same way that I say everything else, and so I'll get really far into it, and then I find out that I've just completely misinformed somebody. I've just made something up. I'm as bad as those Russians that hacked the U.S. election.
Now you're going to get this podcast thing taken down because you said that. The right-wing grifters are going to come after us now.
I can't tell if, like... It's like political horseshoe theory with podcasts. I feel like podcasting by its nature, you get so many like right-wing weirdos.
Right.
And I don't know why. I actually do know why. It's because of conservative talk radio. And that's that, like, we had Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh. Couldn't have happened to a worse guy. That was their big bread and butter. That's how they became so famous. And that's some of what influenced, like, why Fox News is so crazy, is that people will just listen to Glenn Beck and Rush Limbaugh say crazy shit in their car on their morning commute. And that became a very normalized way to receive information. So I do genuinely think that that's a lot of why, like, weirdly conservative and misinformed podcasting is, like, specifically the podcast space works so well. Mm-hmm. But I don't know a damn thing about podcasting. That's your job.
Same. That is my job that I totally prepared for. Yeah, I listened to so many right-wing conservative podcasts in preparation for this.
That's why you're the new Rush Limbaugh.
That's why I'm the new... I don't know if I should feel insulted or, like, honored.
I think you should be insulted, actually. I don't think Rush Limbaugh was a good guy. I think he was kind of a piece of shit, but he made a lot of money doing it.
Exactly. And you know what? All I care about really is the money.
That's why you're interviewing me.
Exactly. Who's going to get me canceled on the first episode? Yeah.
Yeah. You know, all publicity is good publicity.
Exactly. Even if I get death threats over it.
Yeah. Because you might get a HelloFresh sponsorship.
Yo. You know what? It's all worth it. It's all worth it. I would chill out for, like, any big company that's willing to sponsor. BetterHelp. We can underpay our therapists. That's fine.
Established titles.
Which one was that? The one that like lied about giving you a plot of land? Or
yeah, you're like saying that they would give you a plot of land and therefore under Scottish law you would be a lord. Incoherent.
How did anyone even think like that was a real thing?
Because it's
that wasn't a scam.
It's kitschy enough, right? That like it almost makes enough sense of like, oh yeah, surely the Scots are weird enough that they would have this obscure law that I can exploit. What a funny gag gift for my husband of 15 years. So like, I don't know. I guess I kind of get it. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know. Maybe if I were like 15 years older than I am, so if I were 90, then I would probably buy that for someone.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. You don't want to be known as Lord Taylor?
I had a guy at Sick New World who I thought was trying to sell my aunt drugs, but he wasn't. He was trying to sell her religion. It was, we were like, I think this was during a Perfect Circle set, which I guess makes enough sense. But like, he came up to us and he was like, my name's Mistik. And I'm like, I've uncovered the like. You guys can't see the face that Kai's making right now, but
I wish
it's
we
really
had a camera
good.
on.
Yeah, it's real good. You'll just have to believe me. He's actually evacuating all of the fluids from his GI system right now.
That's exactly what is happening.
That's what that faint gagging noise is. Anyway, so he came up to us and was like, oh yeah, here's like this thing that I'm doing. And he like, I can't hear very well anyway, which makes a ton of sense why I'm at a music festival. And he like looks at me and he goes, so are you a princess or a queen? And I was like, I don't know. I think I'm sort of an unspecified regent. And he goes, yeah, know your worth. And I was like, all right, I'll take it. So I think that I wouldn't want to be a lord. I would want to be an unspecified regent.
Unspecified regent.
Sorry, you're not the first person to ask me this.
You know what? I'm completely okay with not being the first one if that is your response to that. That is insane.
I know. And then my friend was like, was he trying to ask if you were married? And I was like, yeah. I mean, maybe, but like...
Who knows?
He knows more than I do. His name's Mistik, and he's figured out the secrets in the universe.
Everyone go dox Mistik right now.
Mistik, and he had it spelled on a wristband.
So he didn't forget what his name was later. You could just look down.
Yeah, I don't know if it's like a medical response wristband or just like to remind, like, you know, like the what would Jesus do?
Right.
It's what would he do? But he's the guy.
He's him. He doesn't know what he's going to do. He's that unpredictable.
Wild card. I can't do the like Charlie Day voice. Wild card, baby, falls out of a van. I'd like to combine that scene, but with Lady Bird when Lady Bird throws herself out of the car.
Dude, you should do that.
Yeah. Being a video editor is a stupid job, and no one should do it.
You should. You can just make shit posts on YouTube. Just do whatever you want.
That's like, I took this class with Professor Keenan Diaz, who has a different podcast. And it was like classic TV, and we watched the episode of The Ed Sullivan Show where the Beatles are on. And like famously, these girls are just screaming and like sobbing in the audience that this is the biggest thing ever that the Beatles have come to the US, because at this point they weren't this huge like US crossover hit yet. But earlier in the episode, they have Frank Gorshin, who's a stand-up comedian, who's just this like little guy that kind of looks like if you put Frank Sinatra in a funhouse mirror. Really funny guy, actually. And so I was like, oh, wouldn't it be funny if I took the like, because it's already the Kuleshov effect to have these like women reacting to the Beatles. You could also show like foul-mouthed men in the audience and you would have a totally different impression of who the Beatles are just based on how it's edited. Mm-hmm. So I decided to pull the footage of the girls reacting to the Beatles and put it on Frank Gorshin. So he'd like tell a joke and they'd just be like, like sobbing in the audience. So like, I don't know. That's all. I think all of editing is a shit post. Kuleshov is the original shit poster.
Kuleshov is you know what? That's the line for the episode. I think we found it. That's what
it's title.
That's the title for this episode right here.
It's true though.
It is true.
Associative montage. Like all shit posting is associative montage in some ways. Like, I love those posts that are like, Breaking Bad fans have an MFA in editing because, like...
They really do, though. It's crazy.
It's outstanding. I love the one from Better Call Saul of Lalo, like, jumping off the cliff into the car, but it's like a Mario jump.
Oh, yeah. Dude, I have no idea how the fuck, like, these people come up with this shit. Like, it's...
Like, I theoretically get how they do it, but I don't know how you, like, have the idea.
Yeah, that's what I'm, like, stuck up on. It's just, like... Why? Like, what goes on in your brain where you're like, yeah, this is what I'm going to make today?
You wake up with a renewed sense of purpose. Like, you found God.
You found God.
And it's Lalo jumps really high, and it's just that fall continuing to go. Or the, like, Kitchen Nightmares Breaking Bad.
I love that shit. That's my favorite thing ever. It's just it's always either like Breaking Bad or like the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies that they edit those. Yeah.
And sometimes the prequels.
So yeah.
I don't know if you've seen this video, but I just found out the context for it. It's of cartoon Anakin from I can't remember which game it was, but it was a PS2 game that did come out as like a tie-in for I think Revenge of the Sith. Mm-hmm. And it's him like performing Take Me Out by Franz Ferdinand.
What?
Okay, never mind then. I guess the context is that like MTV like made this video to promote the tie-in of the game, and at the time, Take Me Out was like the biggest track in the US. I just watched a whole interesting YouTube documentary because I get all my information from YouTube because I'm a red-blooded American, and it was about the history of Take Me Out and how that song blew up. By the way, because I'm, a person with a film degree who wears high-waisted pants. You should all listen to Franz Ferdinand. What a great band. But yeah, I guess that like that was this like bizarre tie-in that I always see like pop up in my friends periodically because those are my 2-inch. Oh, I'm wearing the shirt. Oh my God. I'm wearing a Franz Ferdinand shirt.
Dude, it was meant to happen. You were always meant to talk about this.
I only know 2 bands. It's Franz Ferdinand and Queens of the Stone Age. And then sometimes I'll just listen to Tom Jones' What's New Pussycat? Mm-hmm. Whoa, just on loop. It's the sum of all music in the world.
Those are the only artists that matter, really.
Obviously. Is Tom Jones still alive? I think he is.
Is he? I thought is he actually alive still?
He's Schrodinger's Welsh pop star. Whoa. Yeah, I don't know. He might be dead.
I'd be shocked if he was still alive, honestly. I have no idea.
There's a few that I've been surprised by, like I didn't realize that. I guess like it makes enough sense that Harvey Keitel's 85.
Yeah.
But like I watched Mean Streets the other night, the only movie ever, and I was kind of astonished that I was like, like I didn't realize that Harvey Keitel, he had like the only music artist ever, Huey Lewis. That Harvey Keitel and Huey Lewis had this very like oddly parallel like career trajectory, where I guess Harvey Keitel had served in the Marines for I don't know how long, but he was a court stenographer for like 10, 12 years and got his start in theater toward the end of that, but he wasn't in a movie until he must have been 28 or 29. So it was quite a long time coming. And same thing, like Huey Lewis had been playing music since he was young and had like gigged around, Ireland and the UK and dicked around. I could be totally wrong. Maybe he was never in Ireland. I realize that I'm spreading misinformation. I know he was in the UK, but he gigged around for a long time. But I don't think that he was. I think that he was probably about 35 when Huey Lewis and the News first got their actual hit. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting to see that happens because I kind of complain a lot because I complain about everything when people are like, oh, well, this director, like Steven Spielberg made his first movie or whatever, not his first movie, but he made Jaws by the time he was 25. I don't care. I just don't. I don't think it matters. I think that you do stuff on your own clock. You shouldn't like stay in your comfort zone so much to where you never do anything. But this idea of like, well, you have to have a university degree and you have to direct your first short or whatever by a certain amount of time, I just think is like patently absurd. And I think discourages a lot of people unnecessarily because, yeah, you could be Steven Spielberg. If you are, fuck you. But like you could be. Or you could be Harvey Keitel.
Yeah.
Who cares? Like, you're going to do what you're going to do. So like push yourself. But like the idea that it has to happen by a certain time, I think is, at least within the very niche demographic of UNLV film students, I would also say that if I were, in my really early 20s and I lived with family and they were fairly affluent, like if you have the resources to make these things happen for yourself at that age, then absolutely do it. But I think it's very easy when you've done that and when all of your friends have done that because you come from similar backgrounds and because you've met at film school or even like an arts magnet school or whatever, which is the case. I mean, a lot more people I realize here have gone to school together before they even got to UNLV than I thought because I'm not really like from here. But I think that if I were in that mentality, I would also think that, yes, you have to make your first whatever by this age because I did it. Otherwise, you're not going to make it. But I think that's a very sheltered way of looking at things and is one that doesn't really map onto people's actual experiences particularly well.
Right. You just like dropped such a hard like motivational speech right off. I forget what we were talking about beforehand.
I don't know.
But I completely agree with that. Yeah.
We're talking about Tom Jones being old.
Okay. Sure. I'm not entirely... I don't remember how we jumped from Tom Jones to...
I was talking about Harvey Keitel being old.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
I was just talking about old men because I love old men. Old men in the arts.
Old men in the arts.
Old men in the arts, except for the racist ones and the sexual assailants. And honestly, a lot of old men in the arts.
Maybe we should just cut that part out. Or should we just leave that in? Cut it out?
It's up to you.
It's staying in. All right.
Sidebar. But yeah, I don't know like what oddly enough, I don't know you that well. So I don't know what your experience has been with that. And I also have no idea how old you are. You could tell me that you're 15 and I'd be like, sure. And you could tell me you're 30 and I'd be like, yeah, okay. But, how do you feel about like these like milestones or whatever?
Okay, first off, do you think I look 30?
No.
Thank you. Anyway, back to answering your question.
I've met a lot of people that they have perfect skin and I'm like, oh, well, you're 20 and that's why. And they're like, I'm 45. And I'm like, well, I don't know how old anyone is.
That's fair. I don't either.
Yeah.
Yeah. Age doesn't matter. No, I'm not saying that. Anyway, what was your question?
We don't diddle kids.
We don't.
What is it? Older than my wife, older than my daughter.
Anyway, we're moving on past that. But yeah, no, I as someone that has yet to, make it in the industry, I do kind of feel like I am behind in where I'm supposed to be, but I know things are going to happen in their own time. And as long as I keep pushing and making strides towards ending up where I want to be, maybe if everything works out the way that I want it to, and if I just keep working hard, maybe.
If you keep on pulling yourself up by your bootstraps.
Exactly. If I keep falling down and keep getting back up,
That's much nicer.
Yeah.
I was being mean to you.
You're just being... Thank you for that.
I wasn't being mean to you. I was being mean to the concept of bootstraps capitalism, but then I was looking right at you.
Yeah. So it seems like at least partially directed at someone.
I don't think it's directed at any. I think it's directed at like the idea of like hustle and grind culture, basically.
Right. Yeah.
Which like is kind of true insofar as like the system is rigged against you 100%. You are not designed to succeed. If you're at UNLV Film, you are not designed to succeed in the industry that you're meant to go to. And that's nothing to do with the school that you're at in and of itself. You can have phenomenal instructors, phenomenal curriculum. You are geographically not close to these places. You're going there because you are not Spielberg's kid. Like you are not designed to be in these spaces. So like it is correct to observe, I think, that you have to work twice as hard. But I think at the same time, that kind of gives a bit of like credence to the system that I don't believe is justified. Insofar as like saying, oh, well, you know, anyone can make it. You have to work 400 times as hard because you're from a disenfranchised population in a poorer part of the country that's removed from the industry you want to be in. But why aren't you just working harder? I think that's a little ridiculous. So like, yes, it is true that like statistically speaking, if you are from an affluent family, and you have the ability to make films because you can get the funding for it, you might not have to work the entire time that you're in university. You have all of these other, support systems. Yes, in a lot of ways you are more likely to succeed because the system exists, even though it's not justified. But to indicate that just because you have those, you'll be successful is absurd. And then also a lot of it is just being in the right place at the right time. So, something might be completely like contrary to trend or to what can be made. Like the idea of making TV shows and films with all indigenous cast and crew, it's happened before, but it's exceedingly rare. And now we're in, not a golden period, I wouldn't say. And I don't think that I can really speak on that as someone who's not indigenous, but like just for example, right? Like I just watched Fry Bread Face and Me, and that's pretty soon after I finished watching Reservation Dogs. And that's something that wouldn't have been able to happen 20 years ago, but a lot of people who would have been working just as hard are now suddenly in an opportune place, and that's because of the efforts of indigenous people. That didn't just happen. But it's also the gatekeepers going, oh, well, maybe we can kind of let you in. So, work hard, grind, do all that, but don't make yourself unhappy doing it, and don't put down people who are not as fortunate as you, because sometimes they're not as fortunate, in this like socioeconomic privilege way, and sometimes they're just not as lucky. So to imply that that's their personal failing, I have a real problem with, and I don't think that people do that intentionally. I think it is very much just a byproduct of their own like way that they view themselves and their work ethic. But it is certainly, I think, both hurtful and largely untrue.
Yeah, I don't know what else to say onto that other than I agree. I mean, I should have more to say given that I am like Asian American, but I don't know.
I think it's like so hard to talk about groups that you're in.
Yeah.
Like we've kind of talked about that a little bit, but
I don't know, because I don't know. It kind of feels like if I talk about the struggles of Asian Americans in trying to break through in like the film industry, kind of feels it kind of to me feels like I'm kind of like putting down and like making the effort seem like it was kind of like in vain or like not as impressive as it should have been. I don't know, but
I think it's hard to toe that line.
Yeah.
Of like recognizing the accomplishment for what it is, but also recognizing that the accomplishment is not enough.
Yeah. I don't want it to sound like mean, like, oh, it's all for naught. It's still predominantly white dominated and nothing is going to change that. But I don't know.
Sometimes it can feel true and sometimes it is like,
yeah.
I can't like, I can only speak a little bit to like, like we had like a really great year for hard of hearing representation, and specifically like representation for people who are profoundly deaf, which is not a demographic that I'm a part of, even though I'm hard of hearing. So like Sound of Metal came out and Coda came out, and they both did great on the award circuit. I believe this was the same year or within a couple of years of each other. And this seemed like great. And like, I'd been told like, oh, it's marketable, right, that you're hard of hearing. And that's something that I don't play up a lot in my scripts. I tend not to talk about it because I feel like in a way it's odd, right? Like when you're a part of a group that's underrepresented, you can only in a lot of ways tell your own experience. You can't represent everybody. Like, again, I am broadly part of this umbrella group, but I am not profoundly deaf. And even then, every profoundly deaf person is going to have a different experience from somebody else. But because you're underrepresented, the one story that gets told becomes the image of all stories. And you have this immense pressure that just doesn't exist if that's not the case. That like you have to, you can't just talk about, oh yeah, I experienced this growing up mostly hearing and then progressively losing my hearing. And like, like I talk a lot, for example, about how I feel that I am disabled by my socioeconomic circumstances. Whereas if I had grown up differently, my hearing loss would not have necessarily been disabling, and that I am disabled in some spaces and not in others. But that's very specific to the way that I've grown up. If I tell a story about someone, again, who's had like my hearing loss experience, even though it's already specific enough, there's going to be this big thing of like, oh, you're representing all people with hearing loss, because there's so few like mainstream stories about it, that I think in a way for me personally, I feel like I'd almost rather just not try than have to take on that responsibility that's being unfairly placed upon any individual marginalized filmmaker, but is still there nonetheless.
Right. Because then it kind of forces you to be like the voice of your like group. And it's like, that's like a lot of pressure. And if someone in your group like doesn't connect with it, what is that supposed to say about your work or themselves? Like, it's just, it's a lot. It's it's tough. It's really tough to like try and find or like walk that line and just, yeah.
And I don't think you can. Like, like another example is like, I remember like growing up that the only like bisexual women and like women adjacent people on TV were like, hot white women. And like, isn't it sexy that she's making out with a girl, but she's really going to end up with a man? And like basically kind of validating these like unfortunate stereotypes of like making choices, quote unquote, when like life is a rich tapestry, man. Like you don't ever decide. You have a multiplicity of experiences for forever, but arcs in narrative fiction have to be completed. Otherwise you do not have an arc. If it's completely open-ended, not that there's not really impressive art that does that, but like by and large conventional media, you have to resolve that. And so when you have this intrinsically open-ended thing of like someone who is bisexual, it feels like you need to resolve that one way or another, but that perpetuates a lot of really bad ideas. I grew up in a very like biphobic household, and that would get reinforced by stuff that I watched with my family. But, now we have a lot more representation. And even then I still feel like, oh, well, I don't want to perpetuate the idea that like, bisexuals are like whorish fiends and not only because like, I think that it's totally okay if that's your lived experience, but that has been the stereotype. But if I were to talk about my life, would I have like the perfect, like chaste LGBT, like marketable experience? I don't think so. And I don't want people to be upset because they don't resonate with my work and feel that I'm misrepresenting them and put them in the situation that I was in of having your family see things and then come to you with assumptions they made based on, the TV. And then you have to be accountable for someone else's art, essentially, because that's that's the prism through which they view your identity. And I'm afraid of doing that. And like, I definitely recognize that hinders me as an artist, that I find it very difficult to talk about my own experiences. And so I can go through allegory because it's easier. And that in a way is lost because I'm still allowing the space of talking about certain, identities and intersections that I occupy to be told by people who have never experienced them.
Yeah.
And I don't think that you can like win that. I don't think that there's like a correct answer.
Definitely. Whenever I write my own scripts, like I want to incorporate as much of me as I can while also making it clear that it's not me.
Yes.
So it's just like every like self-insert character I've ever made has always ended up white or just not Asian. And I don't know why, but because I'm putting like all these other things into them that are just me, like whether it's like anxiety or like like my mental health. It's just I just can't make them fully myself because I don't know. It's difficult because I don't. If the person is white, if the character is white, in my opinion, then it's like, okay, it's not a part of my group. So if someone who is Asian were to, read my work or see my work, I wouldn't have to worry about them like connecting with it or not connecting with it. Whereas if I did, that would, I don't know how they would react to it. I could set my group back a few decades, or I could like make something that's really moving and resonates with a lot of people. It's just, but that pressure is also there because I don't want to like let other Asian people down. So it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's tough.
And I think it's so vulnerable to be direct about your own experiences,
Right.
which I'm very uncomfortable with. Like that's a big part of it. It's the responsibility angle, and then also having to like I think that every character, right, that like is written well in some extent is a self-insert, right? Like I don't believe in that being an insult. I think that's a little like crazy, but it is used that way, right? But I think that like, I've noticed that when I write like comedy, pilots, I tend to have a like younger femme presenting person who's very idealistic and doesn't realize that they're kind of being exploited, and then like a grizzled middle-aged man in a younger man's body who's already figured all of this out but can't figure out how to get his way out of the situation and like the grave that he's dug. And I realized that is who I like. The younger person is kind of who I was when I was 16 or 17 and I first graduated high school and was like working full time and didn't really understand anything. And then the other one is who I'm afraid I'm going to become. Like in my mind, I'm Paul Giamatti. I am not like, I don't look like how I do. I don't whatever. Like I am Paul Giamatti in Sideways, drinking the spit take wine, just being absolutely pathetic, having no idea how to like fix his life. So like, I think that those are both me in equal parts, but they're not me directly. And I think that sometimes my work could benefit from me being a little bit more direct, and I'm still figuring out how to do that. But at the same time, I also don't think that I don't think everyone has to be completely autobiographical, right? Like, we don't all have to be Lena Dunham.
Yeah. I think it's for the best that we don't end up like Lena Dunham.
I concur. I'm trying to think of a better example that's not Lena Dunham, but I'm blanking. She's the only one that's coming to mind.
Yeah, that's like the big one, isn't it?
Larry David.
Yeah.
The duality of New Yorkers.
It's either you're Lena Dunham or you're Larry David. There's no in between.
The two genders.
I'm
definitely Larry David coded, unfortunately. But yeah, I don't think that, I think that it's one thing that, I acknowledge that I'm afraid of being autobiographical, and that's sort of an issue. But I don't think that everyone has to be completely autobiographical. I don't think it's intrinsically a flaw. It depends on where it derives from. If you're doing it because you're afraid, then you might be potentially not making great work that's very inspired and unique because you're afraid. But if it's just because it's not the mode that you are the best in, that's also okay, because inevitably if you're, what I think makes someone really engaging, even if some of their work is not super, polished, is that it's very specific. And so if you are a good enough writer, I think you already have to be specific enough. So inevitably some part of you or some little experience, even if it doesn't seem very big, will end up in your work. So, it's kind of figuring out where you fall on that, and where any individual work that you're doing falls on that, allegorical to autobiographical to completely unrelated, spectrum.
Right. Well, I was wondering, this is kind of related, but also not. What made you want to be a filmmaker, involved with film?
My parents are divorced. No, I promise I'm going somewhere with this. My parents are divorced, and I'm an only child, which I think explains so much about me. And I think that there's some parents of only children who are really overly involved to a point, and helicoptery, particularly if they're affluent, and that's part of why they chose to have one child. And then there's some which are total latchkey and not paying that much attention. I love my parents, but I think that I was further on the latchkey spectrum by a lot. And I was very bad at talking to other kids. And I don't really know why this is. Like I said, I didn't have siblings, but like I had cousins and I was around other kids, but I just could not like connect in a super meaningful way. I don't think that I was like, I don't think I ever got like made fun of properly and felt socially ostracized until I was quite a bit older. But like as a kid, I just didn't know how to relate to other children, even if they were really nice to me. I just didn't know how to do it.
Right.
But I would talk to my parents' friends, and that seemed fine. But I spent so much time home alone, and a lot of time where even if I was home, you know, my parent on duty was not around for whatever reason, right? And so I would just watch a ton of movies, and this is when TiVo was still around. We had a TiVo, which meant we were rich in Reno economics of the recession. Oh yeah, and like so we could do like, you know, some stuff, but I didn't have this like experience of constantly being around people. I spent a lot of time by myself, but I had a TV, and so we would just, you know, we would go out to watch, you know, movies with my extended family. And that was, you know, mixed results. If there's like a little bit of nudity, my grandpa walks out of the theater, which I think is honestly really funny. He usually just lets us stay, but he just leaves.
Okay.
Yeah, so like I have this like weird experience of like going to like the movies was my favorite thing, but I also was terrified of every movie because I was afraid that something you know, salacious was going to happen, and then I was going to like be like having to sit there with my family because like I mostly grew up in Utah, and some of my family is LDS. I didn't grow up religious at all, but I was around it, and there's some very particular like norms around what is okay, and that includes like at the time, you know, gay marriage wasn't legalized until I was like across the country until I was in high school, I think, and the only way that I could kind of like interact with people who seemed like me were to watch TV and to watch, you know, Judd Apatow movie reruns on the E! Channel or whatever. But like I really felt that like the people in the television are my friends, or like, and like not in like, I think that sounded really depressing the way that I said that. But like people that I could relate to, and like, oh, I'm having a hard time like interacting in this like, you know, very weird new environment, but I can, you know, kind of reflect on what it would be like to be somewhere else or to have, you know, the adult version of whatever I'm worried about, you know, in cinema. Right. And it's very visual. And I'm sort of two minds about it because since 1927 with Al Jolson's The Jazz Singer, which is the only fact you ever need to know to graduate film school, that's the one that you'll get asked all the time, that like sound is a big part of film. And like I said, I'm hard of hearing. So I, in some ways, find it difficult to go to the cinema, like actually go to a movie theater because I, you know, I grew up in a hearing family. And so to be like, hey, can we go to the closed caption screening was never going to happen. This was so not like, I think that we've come a long way in acknowledging like accessibility, like in the past, like maybe 5-10 years. This was not the case when I was growing up. So I loved movies because they were largely visual, even though there were sound elements that I didn't necessarily get. And I just felt that they really resonated on a very visceral level because you're watching people experience their, you know, their lives in this very immersive way. And, you know, I firmly believe that there's a lot of movies that are absolutely preferable to see in the cinema, right? Like if I'm going to go to a big Bollywood masala movie, I'd hate to watch it at home. If I can go see it in a movie theater where people are shouting and they're talking and they're doing whatever, like that to me is the way that that's meant to be experienced. But at the same time, like I definitely benefited a lot from basically like this golden age of DVRs and of internet piracy. And there's so much stuff, like, I sound like I'm joking and I'm not. There's so much stuff that I had access to that changed my opinion of myself because of the fact that I was able to access it through internet piracy, and I couldn't rent it at FYE with my mom because she's not going to say, hey, yeah, why do you want to watch the bisexual rock star movie? Like, I'm not having that conversation. It's going to go horribly for me. There's, you know, like in Salt Lake at the time, this has largely changed, but like, there was a big movie theater by my grandparents' house that was owned by this guy called Larry H. Miller, and he didn't want to screen Brokeback Mountain. And so they just stopped getting focus feature movies because he was such a dick about it. So like the cinema landscape, I think there has changed a lot. And it's very weird because like you have all of this like, you know, amazing independent cinema because of proximity to Sundance. But then in the suburbs, which is where my grandparents lived, you had very like restrictive kind of culture. And I couldn't always go do stuff by myself because like when my mom and I moved to the suburbs, I couldn't ride my bike to the movie theater. I couldn't get on the train anymore. We lived too far away. So I very much, like I'm an artist and I'd love to think that people are going to pay for my work, but I also acknowledge that there's a lot of people, say hypothetically, that would never have access to your work in the first place if they couldn't bootleg or pirate it first. And then once they discover that they love it and it's resonant, they will start paying for it when they're able to. So, I think in a lot of ways that I might have had a much like worse experience 15 years prior than when I was, growing up and then, 15 years later. Right. So I think that intimacy is why I love film and why I love television. But it's also very much a product of like when I grew up and the way that I did.
So what I'm hearing is you endorse piracy.
I do.
Yeah?
100%. I've got 100%? the like copyleft symbols on my water bottle. I do like, I think be reasonable, right? Like if it's a really small independent film, a lot of the time you can just literally email or DM now like the people who made it and ask for it and they'll send it to you. But do I think that like a 15-year-old torrenting the Spider-Man movies is like morally evil? I think that's bizarre. And I think that so much of the structure of like, commercial film, and this is not a new thing at all. This started with the studio system, right? Like they used to own the theaters, which Paramount, USV Paramount has been struck down by the Trump administration. So now they're allowed to do that again. Cool fact. But like, this has always been the nature of film, is that it's this paradoxically very intimate and very accessible, but very commercialized medium, right? Like it's the art of the people, but at the same time, people are only allowed to interact with it in a very particular way. Yeah. I disagree with that. I think that, there's a lot of resources that people have that maybe they don't necessarily know that they can take advantage of, but sometimes they legitimately can. Like public libraries in a lot of ways have kind of gotten better, at least like where I live from when I was a kid. But even then, again, like if I were to go to the public library when I was a child, even though I lived right across the street from it and ask for some of the things that I wanted to see, they weren't going to have them. Or I was going to have to like look at them in the eyes and do that. And even though I wasn't watching anything like that crazy, I still was in a pretty conservative area. And it's embarrassing, right? Like, especially when you're a kid and you don't have that like confidence in yourself and that's how you're gaining it. So, I really do. Like, I don't have this, like, huge moral qualm with... I have a problem with people who monetize stolen art. Absolutely. Yeah. And even, like, people who steal... Like, it's bizarre. Like taking a TikTok or whatever and just posting it on your page and making money about it, even though you didn't make it. Right. I have an ethical issue with that, but torrenting studio films... I just don't care. Right. I'm not Metallica, right? Like, I have the that's why I hate Metallica. It honestly is, like, very little... I think their music's a little too clean, but, like, that's just personal taste. I don't like them as people because of their, like, whole thing with Napster. I think that's a little ridiculous. So, like, maybe I don't like every party involved, like, the Napsters or the Pirates Bay or whatever, who create the infrastructure for piracy, but individual internet piracy, I do not have an ethical problem with, and I do think has democratized and improved film in a lot of ways. Yeah,
and I think especially now with like, streaming and Max, like just throwing away entire series and movies. Yeah, like sometimes piracy is like the only way to watch, some of these things. Yes. So it's just like, what else do you expect me to fucking do? Like exactly. Like it's and again, like it's an anti-art stance in the pursuit of commercial gain. Right. Having a tax write-off by getting rid of a whole movie is crazy. That's not the individual consumer's problem. At that point, you are completely morally like a lot of the filmmakers, again, because they want people to see their movies and people can't. Yeah. Torrenting is allowing that to happen. It's like, with the Internet Archive. I don't know exactly what's happened with this, but I know like that was an issue that the library had. And like, I never paid for a textbook the whole time I was in university. And this is a thing I've told my professors. I'm not like this is not... You've admitted to this? Oh, 100%. Okay, cool. Yeah, no, I like I said, I'm a big proponent of accessing things how you can within your own money. I spent... How much have I paid for my university degree? I think that with the amount of money that I paid out of pocket for my like initial credits at community college, and I'm very fortunate that I don't have student loans.
I am very fortunate that I don't owe student loan debt. But I still probably paid around $30,000 for a 4-year degree. That meant that this was also with working. I was not going to be able to afford for my textbooks to considerably increase my semester costs by up to $500, being, conservative. I was not going to do that, and you shouldn't have to do that. University should be free, obviously, but within the existing infrastructure, pirate your textbooks. Especially if it's Pearson or whoever, these awful giant manufacturers who try to extort students and educators at every turn, pirate your textbooks. But what I was getting to is that, that's my piece of advice for film majors, pirate your textbooks. But they took down Z Library, and some of it was saying oh, well, that is illegally, creating copies of something. And that is true. It is bootlegging books.
Right.
But at the same time, I think that there's a huge service to a lot of these archives. The Internet Archive does amazing work, and so much of it you never see, but does, greatly impact the way that you interact with the internet. There are things that would have been completely lost, and it seems like some of them are insignificant, but you never know until they're gone. So, I think that if you were, I always say the movie that changed my life was Todd Haynes' Velvet Goldmine, which is a movie that I would never been allowed to see. There's just no way. But it completely reframed the way that I saw myself and the way that I saw myself interacting with art and being an artist, because that's what it's all about. It was supposed to be a David Bowie biopic until he rescinded it. And then Todd Haynes, being a little freak, was like, yeah, I'm going to make something much crazier that reflects on why people even care about Bowie. That changed my life. I torrented that movie. I heard about it online, and I thought that seems really interesting, and I wouldn't have had access to it otherwise. I couldn't find this semi-obscure, mild box office bomb from 1997 at the red box at Walgreens. And I probably wasn't going to find it at FYE, which I guess FYE, the one that I went to growing up, has closed, which I was very upset about. And I saw one in a mall in Toronto a couple of years ago, and I bought something, and I was like, this is great, because we don't have these, in my part of the States anymore. And the guy goes, cool, that's going to be $13. And I was like,
he just did not care.
He did not give a shit. And I don't blame him. That teenager in Toronto shouldn't care that I'm buying Insidious at FYE out of a moral stance.
Yeah.
But I cared. But yeah, I think that, I couldn't have accessed a lot of those things. I believe firmly in physical media. There's a lot of things that I own on physical media. But also accessing things how you can. And if the difference between you kind of seeing yourself and I don't think that representation intrinsically fixes systemic issues, but I do think that it gives a lot of, power to individuals to be able to, and to kind of recognize themselves as part of a group that can be mobilized. I think representation is important, even if it's not the end all be all for, fixing problems. But if the difference between seeing yourself on film and not is having to pay to get to a movie theater, or to get a streaming service or whatever, you should just steal. Or you should see if you can find it through your library, because a lot of them do have Hoopla and Canopy, whatever else. I can't remember what all Clark County has. But like I said, when I was growing up, I grew up in that very weird middle period between being a millennial and being Gen Z, where we did have streaming services, but Netflix was still mostly working on DVDs, and it was a huge deal when Netflix started carrying movies. Right. So at the time there was a certain inaccessibility of we still had enough physical media that you could find some things, but we were starting to get rid of it.
Yeah.
So, I think you should do what you can.
Do whatever you can.
Yeah.
Even if it means, turning to illegal ways. I'm trying to save face, just in case any officers or whatever are listening in. This is all a joke. We're not. This is.
I torrent movies in Minecraft.
We've established early on that we gaslight our audience. So yeah.
I actually pay for all my movies. I pay them twice.
You paid for them
just
twice.
To be generous.
Yeah, I totally didn't watch Velvet Goldmine as a YouTube video.
It wasn't on YouTube. It was on Putlocker. Putlocker? How do you say that? I don't know. I think I'm too afraid to get on this service now. But yeah, I think that, and it's funny too, because I know from kind of working as a TA and being on the education side of it, there's so much educational material that would be lost without like there was a movie that we showed in Sex and the Cinema when I took it. And that like we more or less knew, like I was legally in the clear to do this, but like where I probably got it from, as far as I can tell, was someone's DVD rip that they gave to this streaming service that probably shouldn't have it, but I was legally paying for the service. So even though the way that it was acquired was probably illegal, I was not liable. However, I think even if I was liable, you should be able to do that. It's educational material. That was a huge part of, you know, the contemporary LGBT rights, you know, movement in the 90s in India. And in, you know, this is the movie Fire by Dipa Mehta. And in, you know, cinematic history, if we lose access to that just because that movie can't find a distributor anymore, that is a failure as academics.
Piracy is healthy for the film industry.
It is.
It really is. We've just explained why. Really.
There's an ecosystem.
Yeah. Sometimes it's the only way we can find work. And I wasn't kidding about, I actually did watch Velvet Goldmine through a YouTube video.
Oh, are you serious?
I was being
No
for
one's
real.
ever seen this movie when I talk about it.
Really? I watched it this past weekend. It was
No shit.
It was heavily compressed and in 4:3. I have no fucking clue why, because every other clip that I found of it, it was in 1.85, right? But it was just hella compressed. It was good, though.
So I do actually own this movie.
You
If
do
I'd have
own
known
this?
that you were going to watch this, I would have let you log in. Password sharing. But yeah, it's that. Yeah, that movie completely like changed because I watched that when I
Yeah.
was 12.
You were really?
Internet piracy. I told you. I
didn't know you were 12 when
I was
you
not
watched this.
supervised as a child. I joke I'm like a precocious late bloomer of like there's a lot of stuff that like made total sense to me when I was younger that probably shouldn't have caught up to me until I was older, and then other stuff that now I'm like, you know, 22, gonna turn 23 soonish, and I'm like, again, fumbling, not asking for the B&C cashier for her phone number, like, you know. We're all on our own journeys.
Yeah.
What'd you think about this movie?
Not at all what I expected it to be.
It's not.
I went into it knowing almost nothing. So I didn't know it was supposed to be a David Bowie biopic beforehand. So when I did make the connection like halfway through, but like, what the fuck? It was just like, it was like the bisexual Citizen Kane. Like that's what I thought it was.
That's perfect because it is this like epic about journalism and like missed perceptions, and that's really good.
It's non-linear. It's got a very similar structure, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my God, you've cracked this movie that I've seen like 100 times that I think about all the time. That's crazy. But yeah, and it's like, it's nuts to think too, like Ewan McGregor, who in it is playing this like Iggy Pop kind of character who like, I think his like first like introductory scene, he's singing TVI and he like is pouring glitter on his exposed phallus. And I'm pretty sure that was at the same time that they were filming Phantom Menace or like really close by. So yeah, those were, because I think Velvet Goldmine came out like a year before. So it would have been, because he was still like hot off Trainspotting, which was in 95 or 96. So yeah, he was doing both these like polar opposite kind of things, like pretty back to back to each other.
God damn. I did have to, when that scene came on, when his introductory scene came on, I literally had to stop and rewind it and watch it again. No, I'm not explaining why. I'm going to try and get people to watch this movie so they can understand why. Yeah.
It's crazy. It's nuts. And I think that the most valuable thing that you can get out of this movie, it's like interesting to see this like cult following that it's developed, because at the time it wasn't very well received because it was basically seen as like being a bad Bowie biopic. But what's so interesting is that is it biopic or biopic? My mom makes fun of me for saying biopic, like myopic. I think it's biopic.
Because it's like biography,
biographical picture.
Yeah.
But I say biopic because I'm from Utah.
Okay.
Same reason why I can't say Oedipus. Is it
Oedipus?
Oedipus?
It's Oedipus.
It's Oedipus. It's Oedipus, and I got roasted in the film office for saying it wrong. But anyway, like the most interesting thing about that movie is that it is reflecting on why people connect with the artist that they do and how you even get a David Bowie figure, because it didn't happen out of nowhere. It's not that he in and of himself is just so magnetizing that you get these people who revere him like a deity. it's the cultural climate that he was responding to. And, you know, like, for example, like David Bowie has kind of gone back and forth on whether or not he was bisexual. Like, he had said that he was, and he was like, well, I don't know about that. I think I just said it to say it. And then, like, you know, like, it was never super clear. And I think it's hard. Like, I don't think that you can project necessarily, like, I try to not use contemporary labels for people who were not existing in my contemporary time, because things evolve very quickly. But I do think it's like observing behaviors, right? Like, it sounds like he lived a lifestyle which, or like had experiences sexually and romantically, which we would associate with bisexuality. And that's sort of what that movie's about, is like this argument of labeling people, and if it even matters, if you're, you know, in this movie, like a queer teenager in working class, you know, I think they're in the North, actually. I think they're in Leeds, but I can't remember. But like, if you're in this working class, you know, very British industrial background, like, does it matter what label someone uses, or just seeing their image so resonant to you that you kind of divorce them from being a person that takes on a life of its own in the way that it manifests for you? I just, that's what I think is like continues to get me about that movie and gets me about it. That like the older that I get, that is increasingly resonant, that I'm having this like sort of like inceptive experience of like, this is a movie reflecting on how people connect with queer art. And it's the movie that was my first huge connection to queer art. So it's this like two levels of like prismatic vision that I constantly have to negotiate. But I think that that's why it's a worthwhile movie. There's some things about it that aren't great, but you know, I think that you can objectively like evaluate a movie for its like technical prowess, but then also acknowledge that you love it regardless.
Yeah, because of just what it means to you and what you've gotten out of it.
Yeah, like there's a lot of movies that I've gotten a lot out of that I don't like.
Which ones?
Jean Dielman.
Wait, which one?
Jean Dielman. I hate this movie. It's Sight and Sound's best movie ever.
Really?
Yes. I won $1,000 for writing an essay about this. Don't you know everything about me, Guy?
Totally.
Yeah, this was one of the Wegner movies a couple of years ago,
Gotcha.
I don't like this movie. I find it very unenjoyable to watch. But that's what's so interesting about it, is that it deconstructs what it is to be a movie and what Western film grammar actually is and how we can depict women. That doesn't mean that I have to like it to find it worthy of study or worthy of my time. I think this idea of like, well, did you like the movie, son? What a waste of time in most spaces.
Right.
Like in film school, to be honest, I don't care if you liked a movie or not. You know what I mean?
Same,
like you should be able to essay about it or be able to think critically and evaluate why you don't like it.
Yeah. Because I feel like, just did you like it? Yes or no? That doesn't say anything. That's not helpful.
No.
Like, that doesn't. It's meaningless. But like, if you can break down exactly what didn't work for you, like thematically or just like visually, editing wise, like that's something that you can like have a discussion about, and that's like what makes art so interesting, is that it opens these doors to like, you know, have a discussion about what is the film trying to say, what is the film doing, and I that's like one of the things that before I took film criticism, like I just thought that's what it was. I wasn't like huge into reading like movie reviews or anything like that. But then when I found out that we were being asked to like write papers on or like deconstructing the film and like its themes and how it, you know, went about portraying it, that's when I started to really develop a deeper appreciation for film and like directors and everyone else involved in the filmmaking process. And I think, when you take the time to like really analyze a film and analyze why you like it, why you think it works, why you think it doesn't work, it kind of does open your eyes and makes you, you know, become a better artist. And
I think there's so much value in stuff that you halfway like. And like, what I mean by that is like, so my favorite TV show ever is Oz, which in a lot of ways is not a very good show. It's the like historical function of this, looking at it like retrospectively, is that Tom Fontana left NBC because they were getting just pummeled on everything they wanted to do on Homicide: Life on the Street. Even though not many people were watching this show, and that's partly because they kept on getting put in a weird time slot, he was like, okay, HBO's trying to make shows. You know, I'm going to go see what I can do there. And HBO says, well, we'll give you all this freedom. So he's just throwing stuff at the wall with this show and seeing what sticks. So a lot of it doesn't. A lot of it hasn't aged very well. A lot of it, even at the time, was like, really? A de-aging pill for the prisoners? All right, whatever. Or no, it's not de-aging. That's the problem. They aged them through how old they'd be when they finished their sentence. I don't know. It's dumb and it doesn't end up having any relevance on the rest of the show. But like, there's a lot of things in that show that are too busy. And to be fair, that show is a soap opera. And that is not like a criticism. It is by its nature a Shakespearean tragedy melodrama. And if you acknowledge it for what it is, and that's like no one who was working on it was trying to pretend that that wasn't the nature of it, right? Granted, I think that texts are texts in and of themselves. You should be able to analyze a show for what's there rather than just for its intent. That's like a whole secondary thing about Saracen tourism. But like, you know, that show is very valuable because there's a lot of things that I look at and I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have done it that way. But I also have the freedom in a way to do it because they already tried and because I can see what didn't work. I have a reference point, whereas they didn't. They did not know what worked on television, what was too far for people, what was water cooler talk, what worked within the medium that they were in as opposed to being on network or as opposed to being, you know, in a cinema hall. I can reflect on someone else's filmmaking and learn more about mine. And that's not just things that I think are great through and through.
For me, like I feel much more motivated to like work on projects and like write after 48 Hour or Spring Flicks. Yeah, because I just see like all of these amazing films just projected and it just like inspires me. I see like what worked, what didn't fully work for me, but I can see like the attempt that they were trying to do. And it's just, yeah, I think after 48, I think I banged out like 3 or 4 different scripts that I wanted to do for Spring Flicks, like within the next week or so.
I've kind of said this to you, but like the amount of like prolific work that you do as a writer and just as someone who cares about movies and who tries to stay literate in their medium, I'm very impressed by. Because I don't do that. Like I write more now that I'm out of university than when I was in it in a lot of ways, but I have a very hard time saying self-motivated. Right. And I'm very impressed that you can write even half as much as you do. That's enviable and that's very like admirable of a quality to have.
Thank you. But writing for me is like therapy.
Really?
It's free therapy. I just pour like whatever issues I got going on up here. It's just going on like down onto the page. So I just feel better if I write.
Do you kind of plan beforehand or do you just kind of just... That's crazy.
Fuck no. I just go.
See, I think that's why I can't write that.
Really?
I'm very methodical because I'll start writing based on vibes and then I'm like, okay, I need an actual structure for this to be coherent. And then I have to back off and then I have to like work around like my tiny like kernel or like chaff of a script and then build an actual story around it. I'm not good at sustaining myself with vibes. I'm very impressed at anyone who can just like open up, you know, Final Draft or Trelby's open source and just write. I wish I could do that. And I recognize that some of it's like, oh, I wish I could do that. Some of it's learning how to do that. That's a skill that you've developed. It's not just something that automatically comes completely naturally.
Yeah. That's always what I've done though. It's like if I'm forced to like do an outline, I write the script first and then I write as if, then I write the outline after.
Oh my God.
So this entire time when I was taking both like drama pilot and comedy pilot, I had written at least a draft of the script and then went back and did the beat sheet and the outline based on that.
I am going to criticize your workflow a little bit. Yeah. But like, I'm of two minds about that. Because on one hand, obviously you get more work done than I do. Just by a lot. Like I've been I've told people about this short that I'm writing. Yeah. And I did the ADHD thing where like I told everyone to be like, to hold me accountable. And then like one of my friends was like, so how's that going? And I was like, you know, like I'm terrible about it. Once I've put it out in the world, it's like, I'm like, oh, I'm celebrating before I've even done it. But like you write more than I do. So that's already, you know, very impressive. But I do think that sometimes not writing an outline for yourself, because I have like the first feature that I wrote was when I was 15 or 16. And I didn't write an outline. I just went balls to the walls. I like read Save the Cat, and I didn't even like that book that much, and I just wrote a feature. And I knew it wasn't very good, and I was basically like, even at the time, I was like, I'm going to finish this just for the sake of like having done it. Now I know. But that made it so hard on second draft. Right. Because I didn't have like, I didn't see how like I'm very methodical with how I outline to the point that it looks nuts. Like I basically outline in a spreadsheet, and I break it down into every act that I need, and then every individual beat that I have to hit for the act. So like, what is the opening image? I have this worksheet that my friends and I use that I made that like, what's the opening image, and then what's, the first like fuck up that the character has that locks them into whatever they're doing and whatever. And then from there, what's the arc of any individual scene? Like, I'm very precise because I do think that like, I struggle to be very just like spontaneous. I think as a person, I'm not spontaneous. So, I like to see how every element works together. But I also understand that like creating a paint by numbers, even for myself, can be restrictive, both in that I'm not writing that much and also that I'm sometimes not seeing the forest for the trees. So I'm interested to see like someone who has a completely opposite workflow from me.
For me, it's helpful to just. I'm not saying I don't have like an outline or a beat sheet at all. It's just I do it after I already have a draft done, and then I look at it, and then I start to like figure out what areas need help from that, because I think that's much easier to like looking at an outline or a beat sheet. To me, is easier to pinpoint like story problems than to just like reread the script.
See, and I agree with that, and that's why I have to write one first.
See, that makes sense. Your way makes a lot of sense. Mine is the chaotic way, where it's just like, fuck it, we'll find out.
Fuck it, we ball. I think that's so many people, though. Like, I think that in a lot of ways, like, at least from, like, my very limited sample of, like, the people that I interact with, and granted, I have, like, 5 friends that are in town, like, I have, like, people that I talk to regularly. Everyone else, I love you very much, even if we're a distant acquaintance. I think you're great.
Hates you. They hate you.
Yeah. Evil. But like, of like my friends, like I am very much the odd one out, and that I'm so methodical about it. But again, like I kind of envy that, like just getting into a flow state and being able to make your art happen as if your keyboard's this extension of your body and not a machine that you have to learn how to utilize, which is how I approach things.
It's really just like finding a way to like be motivated to work on shit, which is tough.
It's so hard.
How do you deal with writer's block?
I don't get writer's block.
Really?
I get writer's block on individual projects. I do not stop writing as a person. And the reason why is because I had probably a 4-year period between when I was like 16 to when I was 20 where I did not finish anything. I did not start a lot of projects. And when it turned out it was because I'm like every other, zillennial, but like I had been diagnosed with ADHD when I was younger, but I thought, well, that's not my problem because like, I guess in my mind, again, like talking about like even, generational differences within a few years, like it was very much like, that's a boy thing, basically. And so like, oh, if you don't have symptoms like your male cousins, then that means that it's not that severe. And so then and to be fair, like I got through high school in 2 years and I was completely fine. But then as I got older and, you're still going through puberty when you're 16, right? Like my brain started to change and I found it much more difficult to finish things. Once I medicated my ADHD and I figured out other tools for dealing with it, I have not stopped writing at any point. But I also like have forced myself to be in spaces where I have to. So like I graduated a year ago, which does not seem like that happened because I'm still in damn TV writing class.
You're still showing up.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason why is because I know that it's so much harder for me to do things by myself. But when I'm in that environment, I will finish. I do really well with deadlines. And I tend to write really well in like short but structured bursts. And this is how I do everything in my life. Like I was only at UNLV for about a year and a half, which is kind of crazy. But for me, it was really easy to just like take a ton of classes and then know that I was like sprinting rather than doing a marathon. And I think that is, some of that's just the way that my brain works. Some of the way that my brain works is ADHD. But for me, that makes enough sense. So like I have to keep myself like in a space of like, I'm going to keep on doing these workshops. And now I can't do that because of my work schedule. But that's what allowed me to finish a lot of things in the past year. So like, I don't have any tips for like writer's block on any individual projects, but I find that if you have enough balls in the air, you will inevitably start to want to procrastinate one, and then that will force you to work on a different one. So I basically stay productive by procrastinating one piece of work with a different piece of work.
So your solution to writer's block is to just do something else and just
you're still
focus
writing
on it.
something else.
Right.
You're not writing what you started on. I like I said, I if I have a deadline,
Yeah.
I can finish it, but I'm never just working on one thing at one time.
Gotcha.
So if I get fed up with one thing, then I go, well, that's fine because I've got this other thing that I can go work on. So I'm always staying productive. It's just not very linear.
It's just, which is always great, you know?
I don't know how to just like sit and finish something.
Isn't that, what's the studying technique where it's like you do something for like 20 minutes and then you switch off for another 20 minutes?
I'm going to be so honest. I don't know any names for any studying techniques.
Okay.
I didn't learn how to study until I was maybe 21. And that was really hard for me. And I never like learned a systematic way to do it. I just sort of started taking my meds and then like being so anxious about the deadline that I would inevitably get it done.
Yeah.
But I don't really actually know like any of these like sometimes I complain about these like workflow hacks and I just don't like hack culture. And I think that some of it's that there's like legitimate criticisms of this like self-helpy way of approaching everything.
Yeah.
And then some of it's just that I am not the target demographic and I don't even like sitting through tutorial videos. I am that like impatient and like ADHD brained that the idea of like sitting through like it'll be like a 2-minute tutorial on how to install like a cable release or whatever on my camera and I'm like where does he actually start like I'm so impatient about it that I've never been able to absorb any of these hacks. And whenever I try to like optimize my day, I'm so stressed about optimizing it that I've not optimized it at all. I've perpetuated the problem. Like I'm a big believer of like in your living spaces you should maximize the way you're already going to interact with your space. So like I am someone who if the hamper is too far away from like my shower, I will just throw my clothes on the bathroom floor. And I've done this my entire life. So I have to have the hamper in the bathroom. I have tried to not do that. Guy's like so stressed hearing this.
That would drive me fucking insane if I see this shit happening. That would fucking drive me insane.
When I share a bathroom, I don't do that.
Okay.
But when it's just me, oh, absolutely. Like I can't. Like if that's the thing. Like I'm very good at like when I've shared spaces. Like I'm not that much of like the only child stereotype. I respect shared spaces. I largely grew up in my grandparents' house with other people, but like when it's my own space, my brain does not recognize that is a problem. It just blends it into the background. It's bizarre. It just acknowledges that that's a new thing that's a part of the scenery and not even to register it as clutter. So like I have found that if I don't want to create clutter, I have to just work around what I was already going to do. So even though having a hamper in my bathroom looks bizarre, what looks much worse is having my clothes on the floor. And that's what's going to happen if the hamper's not there. So like I that's also how I feel about like generally like workflows with being creative, that I have to accept the way that my brain already works and then work around that as opposed to trying to reprogram it, because I'm not getting new neural pathways just by watching hack videos. And I can try all of these things. And there's a lot of things that I've tried to improve my productivity. But the one consistent way to improve my productivity is just to work around what I was already going to do. So if I know that I'm going to procrastinate my work, then I need to have something else next in the queue to work on. As opposed to if I decide that, oh, I'm going to be the type of person who starts a project and just finishes it, I'm never going to be able to force myself to be that person. I can't bootstraps my way into new brain chemistry. What that's going to do, and what it did for years of my life, was that I just never finished anything, and then I stopped even starting things because I knew I wasn't going to finish them. Whereas if I have multiple things kind of going, which is how I'm already inclined to work, I will probably finish a lot of them because I'm not forcing myself to work in this way that's antithetical to how my brain's set up.
Yeah. So what we're saying here is hack videos or any of these like self-help, whatever, change your mindset things. They're all bullshit, right? You got to work around however your brain works, whatever limitations, or maybe not limitations. That's a mean way of putting it.
Like neurodiversity versus like handicap, right?
Yeah,
like your brain is going to be set up the way that it is. That can be good or bad depending on the circumstance.
You just got to play around that. You just got to like know how to work around that.
100%.
Yeah. If you're someone that makes these hack videos, fuck you. We hate you.
I'm going to marry your mom and I'm going to be your stepdad. And then who's going to have to make their bed? What? You, because I'm your stepdad.
Why would you be their stepdad?
That's just how it works, right? Like you know when a teenager's like, you're not my real dad. Yeah. I'm going to make these hack video creators tell me that I'm not their real dad. And it's going to be fine because I'm plowing their mom. But like, genuinely, I don't like hack. Okay, let me qualify this. Okay. Find hack videos. It's sort of like if you were to try and like develop your sense of like personal like fashion, right? Mm-hmm. But you were only watching videos from people who are in a completely different tax bracket, body type, country, whatever. You can't force yourself to be a wealthy woman on the Upper East Side who's, 5'6" and 100 pounds with willpower. You should find people who align with what you are actually, like the point that you're actually at. Same thing if you're starting out with fitness, you shouldn't be watching people who have body goals who are exceedingly different than you and who have started out at a very different place than you. Mm-hmm. So same thing with like productivity and like, other, brain hacks and whatever. If you find someone like I did actually see this YouTuber, and I don't know what her name was, but she was Northern Irish and she did videos on how she kind of like maximizes her productive peaks. And I think that this is a really good framework. She was like, I know that I am most productive at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's not conventional, but that's when I'm going to be my most awake. So I am going to plan to do more things at that time. And if I know I'm going to be exhausted at 8, I'm not going to force myself to get up earlier in the morning. So like, I think that resonated with me because that kind of spoke to this issue that I'd been having of like, just wake up early in the morning, just do this. I can't do it. I used to work morning shift and I got so sleep deprived that I had to go to the hospital because I cannot, like, if I know that I have to wake up early, I cannot fall asleep earlier. I will fall asleep when I'm going to fall asleep. It doesn't matter how medicated I am. Yeah. It is like I have pretty bad insomnia. So to just say, I'm going to start waking up at 6 a.m. that's going to fix my life. I tried for like a year. It never did. I could never fall asleep earlier. So I was just constantly sleep deprived. Trying to like brute force my way into being someone different than I am just never going to achieve anything. Mm-hmm. So I have to work with what I've been given. And what I've been given is someone who falls asleep at 1 a.m, and like is really productive later at night. Sometimes within reason, you can't do things. I would love to vacuum when I get home from work at 1 a.m, but I can't because I have neighbors. Right. And my neighbors think it's very appropriate to vacuum at 8 a.m, and I'm going to go complain because that's also not an okay time. It's 9 to 9 or like loud hours. But like you should know what that is. And I think that so many, especially like college students, get failed by that of like, for example, like my dad had very bad ADHD, and when I was like, he and I had looked at his like report cards from when he was younger, and they said the exact same things that mine did. But when I was growing up, he was like, why can't you just be better than this? And the reason why is because that's what he had been told. Mm-hmm. So many people, they get their like, like in families, you have somatotypes. This isn't totally borne out, but this is like beginning research. I'm not saying that this is universally true, but the idea that like, certain people are genetically coded to be early risers. Certain people are genetically coded to fall asleep late. Everyone in my maternal family is they fall asleep late, except for my grandpa. Everybody else falls asleep late. Mm-hmm. We've all had the exact same issue of none of us are able to just fall asleep earlier. We can't force it. But because that's, we've changed the way that working is in a lot of ways. Now you can work from home for a lot more jobs. And we've started to recognize a little bit that flexible hours matter, but America's way behind the rest of the Western world. But like you have so many people that they grew up and they, just had to, like, your parents will say, well, when I was your age, I just did this. And see, I turned out okay. And they could probably benefit from the same resources that you did, but you have that reinforced that, like, there's something wrong with me. I just need to brute force my way into being better because that's what my parents did. A lot of the time, they didn't even do that, and they are still struggling. But that's what you get convinced. And then you do, university orientation of, like, here's some basic study tips. And, like, even if for 85% of the people that's helpful, I think that's great. But they're not universal. And that's why, like, I dislike a lot of, coming full circle, like, these, like, right-wing, like, talk radio guys of, like, like, self-help for, like, I recognize I'm not the target demographic for this, but, like, self-help for men. A lot of it is basically turn off your computer at a certain time, wake up earlier, and make your bed. Okay, like, that doesn't fix people who are so socially isolated because of the society that they live in, because of the social culture. Yes, objectively, making your bed is good. That's a thing I picked up as an adult that is great. I love making my bed. I've chosen to have fewer pillows because I know I can't make a whole bed. But like, yeah, that's good for you. And all of these like pieces of advice generally are individually good. But when the sum of their parts is basically that you can just systematically fix something by just pretending to be of a different personality type and pretending to not be mentally ill. I think you have to treat yourself the way that you would if you weren't mentally ill to even start to be able to overcome some of your mental health struggles. Like when I had extremely cripplingly bad social anxiety, I would still basically in my brain, I was like, well, what would I do if I were actually a confident person? And I would do that. And then eventually that, fake it till you make it kind of works. Yeah. So I think to some extent you have to do things that seem unnatural to you to really like benefit you long term. But to act like those things will amount to curing people, especially in some of the more like widespread, systemic generational issues that are leading to mental health crises, I have a huge issue with. And there's so many people that are, like even just speaking at like the university level, who are dropping out of school or having mental health crises that are being reinforced as if it's their fault when it's not.
Yeah. I have something I want to say, but I don't know how to say it in a way that doesn't come across as like mean.
Go for it.
It's not about you. I should just preface that.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's just that what you said was really stupid. And no, I'm just kidding. No, but I don't think like these like mental health issues and that sort of stuff. Like I don't think that like ever fully like leaves you in a way. I feel like that's always going to be like at least just like a small part of you. But that's still going to be something that you're going to have to like deal with and try to overcome like throughout the rest of your life, no matter what. I
agree with that.
Yeah.
I say that to people that like, if you're like, I've been in states of mental health crisis and it's been a very long time since that's happened. Like I know I have obsessive compulsive disorder.
Yeah.
That is not something that I am going to be cured of.
Yeah.
But there's times in my life where it's better, and sometimes it's better because of a direct result of what I'm doing, and sometimes it's worse, and that might be influenced by my own actions, or sometimes it's just not a great time for my brain, and that's incidental. Yeah. But like I've accepted that I am not just a person who has OCD. I am, all of these other things, but I am partly a person who has OCD, and this will be something I deal with for the rest of my life. So like, there was a period of my life, for example, where I was extremely like having bad compulsions about checking locks and doors. And I would drive around my like block and then I would have to go back home and make sure that I actually locked my door, even though I knew that I did it because this was like a loop that I was on. Yeah. I'm no longer having that compulsion. I sometimes have different ones, but like basically the most compassionate thing that I can do is say that, okay, this is going to be something that I deal with for the rest of my life. It's not always going to be the same as it is now. And I think that having this like linear improvement model, basically like capitalist exponential growth for your mental health is a little nuts.
That's absurd to me. Like,
yeah,
that's not how any of that works. Like, not even a little bit.
No, like I had the most depressed that I had ever been up until like losing one of my parents was that I had been extremely depressed when I was a teenager because of the environment that I was in. And then I lost one of my parents despite my life going really well. And I was super depressed again. I'm not a failure because I was super depressed again. And even though, yes, I was overall trending linearly up from when I was 14, I had a dip and that's okay. And like, you can look at your life from this like, expansive view and say, oh, overall, everything has gotten better since I was at my lowest point, and that's great. But that's not always helpful to you when you are individually suffering. Like, if you are having a low, like, I had a couple of weeks recently, and it was because I couldn't get my ADHD meds, but, like, I was much more irritable and like off-put and just like I kind of didn't like recognize myself in the way that I was like really just struggling with everything. Like I nearly started crying at the post office, but there was a guy projectile vomiting in the corner. And so I didn't even cry because I was so confused by the man vomiting. I felt really bad for him. That sucks. I'd hate to puke at the post office. But like I was really struggling with that. But at the same time, I could acknowledge that, yes, I'm doing better now in my overall like grief arc than I was 6 months ago, but I'm still having a bad moment now, and that's okay. So I think that like you have to be compassionate to yourself. And again, like it's also like this is a problem with filmmakers and with artists of like I don't believe in breaking into the industry. I think it's a job. Like, I didn't break into being a theater technician. I incidentally got a job as a theater technician. That's a space that I'm in now. I went to film school to become a theater tech. Great path, everybody. I love my job, to be clear. But like, that's a job that you're doing, and to make it this, like, to equate it with you as a person, I think is very dangerous. And it's something that I struggle with a lot. That, like, it feels so personal that I am a filmmaker is my identity, that when I'm not doing it, I feel like a failure as a person. And that is not helpful. And sometimes you make it in the industry, and, like, say you're 23 and you just graduated from your undergrad, you have a BA in film from UNLV, and you go out to LA and you're getting all these PA jobs, and you finally get, like, a really good, like, second AC job. Okay, you've broken into the industry, but maybe in 2 years you're having a hard time getting an AC job. It's not, your career is not just going to keep on trending up and up and up, right? Like, your life is not a movie. It doesn't follow the arc of the art that you're working in.
Yeah.
And you have to be nice to yourself about that. Like, there's someone that I went to school with who had won, significant awards in their field and could not find work doing it. And was back at film school partly because of that. That's not a failure as a person. That's just the way that it is. Again, sometimes it's just weird circumstance that you can't even affect. So be kind to yourself and don't think, oh, well, I have to break in or I have to be doing so much better than when I was 22. Your career is going to ebb and flow and your mental health is going to ebb and flow. But to even start it preventing that from being extreme, like so drastic, you have to be kind to yourself. And sometimes when you try, to buck against that and to say, no, I'm going to be fine, that's when you're at your worst.
Yeah.
If it's like, oh, I'm not going through a career slump at all, I'm doing amazing, you're not going to take the steps that you need to actually get out of that.
Exactly.
And then it's going to be worse.
I have nothing to add on to that. I think you, like, just hit the nail on the head with all of that. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm here all week.
You're here all week.
I'm here all week. I'm in the podcasting booth all week, actually.
Yeah, we're locked in here for the next week.
And we're going to start eating our hands.
All right.
I've recently, I started playing, totally unrelated. I started playing New Vegas again, and I, like, leveled up, and it was like, do you want the cannibal perk? And I was like, I said no for now, but I do think that, like, if I play this game for long enough, I'm going to start eating people.
Why would you ever say no to the cannibal perk?
Because you lose karma when you eat them.
Who cares?
I do.
Have you played Red Dead? Like Red Dead
No,
Redemption?
I haven't.
Okay, never mind.
That's what I'm hoping to, like, because I've never finished New Vegas.
Yeah.
Because I used to play it on a PS3, which is, despite that being the native system that it's on, is so buggy.
Right.
And it still crashes my PC literally all the time because Bethesda moment. I was trying to get into the RepCon facility and my computer crashed every single time.
Oh,
I finally figured it out and did that whole stupid side quest, and now I'm a legend in Novak. But, like, yeah, I don't know. I play these games and I, like, play them for whenever I do a first run through. I always kind of do it like I'm me, which is to say that, like, I have a goal in mind, but I end up caught up with other people's, like, side bullshit because I feel more fulfilled from doing that than doing my own objective. That's just my life. So that's how I play these games, and I don't want to be mean to people and I don't want to eat dead bodies. But, like, I think if I literally were in that situation, I might eat a dead body.
Yeah.
I don't think you should lose karma for eating dead bodies.
I agree.
If you're in a post-apocalyptic survival situation,
that's just how it is. You just got to do it.
Let's not shame the Donner Party, right? When I was a kid and I learned about the Donner Party, this I can tell that I lived in Reno when I was a child, because it was just like, oh yeah, and by the way, the Donner Party, they all ate each other. That's your local history. But then when I moved to Salt Lake, they were, like, teaching about the Donner Party in school, and it was this, like, really taboo thing. They were like, they might have eaten people.
Why are they dancing around that? Like, that's so interesting.
That's sort of the notable thing about the Donner Party, very famously. The most interesting thing is that they ate people. Because they didn't make it to where they were going. That's why they were eating each other.
Exactly. Why else would we be talking about them if they didn't eat? That's the whole thing.
That's like talking about Harvey Keitel and then never mentioning that he played Judas. What are we here for? I don't think he should have won a Razzie for that. I think that he was great.
He won a Razzie for that?
Did you give
him a Razzie for that shit?
Yeah, for Last Temptation.
What the fuck?
I know, I agree. I think it's evil. I think everyone in Last Temptation's great and no one gets it. Yeah. That's my film bro movie is Last Temptation of Christ for sure. I love that movie. I fell asleep the last time I watched it, but I love that movie. A lot of it's boring.
understandable.
That's not a read. Just a lot of it's boring.
It's just facts.
So much of until we get to like the destruction of the temples, just sort of like Jesus meandering and being like, but what if I meant to fuck? And the whole time you're like, dude, yeah, like that's why we're here. That's what this movie is. But he has to come to that conclusion.
Yeah.
And then he has to like be on his deathbed and realize that he shouldn't have done that. And then he gets back on the cross. Has anyone seen this movie? Does anyone care about this movie? Is there anybody out there?
We're just spoiling The Last Temptation of Christ.
This movie from 1984.
This very new movie from 40 years ago now.
I don't know, like what I'm someone who actually kind of likes spoilers because it depends on what it is. There's a lot of times where if I'm kind of losing momentum, if I find out what I have to look forward to, I get really excited about it. But like I don't think I've ever watched anything completely unspoiled. Like the only reality show that I watch is RuPaul's Drag Race, and even then there's so many like incarnations of this show now. There's so many spinoffs that I've stopped watching just because I can't keep up, and also I don't have Paramount Plus or Wow Presents Plus or whatever these streaming services are.
There's too many.
There's too many.
There's too fucking
I don't get it. But yeah, so like when I was watching it, I generally would watch unspoiled. Like it's this huge thing. Like I think Big Brother's probably the same way, but like Drag Race, because it's filmed ahead of time, there's like a whole community around spoilers, and like I don't go into that subreddit. I'm a Redditor, which I think explains a lot about me. But like I don't go to the spoiled subreddit, but sometimes I see something tagged spoiler, I'll click on it just out of habit, and I'm like, okay. Yeah. So like I operate with everything I watch with a tiny bit of spoilers, enough to keep me interested. But I don't like, even if something though, I think if something's completely spoiled and I don't enjoy it just because it's spoiled, then it's not good.
Yeah.
If the only thing I have to look forward to is surprise, then you've not made anything worthwhile.
That's how I feel about a lot of Marvel stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you a Marvel hater?
No.
Really?
I'm kind of a Marvel enjoyer-ish. They've been annoying me recently, though.
How recently is recently?
Recently, like the newer movies-ish, with the exception of the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Give me a year. When did this start?
This is like therapy. Let's see here. I guess when did Endgame come out? 2018? 2019?
This has been annoying you for 7 years?
No, a little bit. Wait, actually, no, I do know.
6 years?
When did No Way Home come out? Spider-Man.
I don't know.
2021, I think.
Maybe.
2020, at the beginning of the pandemic, or around the pandemic is when they started.
I'm not a Marvel girly. I don't know any of these things.
Okay, that's fair.
I watched all of the like core MCU movies in 2020 because I'd only seen like a couple of Iron Man movies.
Yeah.
And I was like, what are people talking about? And then I was like, that was an unsatisfactory experience. Because there's some individual movies that I think are great.
Yeah. Oh yeah. There's not enough to where I feel like it's a fully worthwhile experience.
That's interesting to hear from someone who likes Marvel.
Yeah.
Like, you know, like I think that, like I said, Captain America, Winter Soldier, I think is a great thriller in isolation. I think that's a great movie. But like, I don't know. Do you think, I'm going to ask you a really leading question. Do you think there's something like antithetical to like making movies episodic to like how the medium works?
Yes, I 100% do. Especially with the way that Marvel is going, the way the Marvel is going now is like they're making it episodic, but they don't know where they're leading to. They have no idea. So it's like we have so many plot threads that are just open-ended. We have characters where we just have no idea when they're coming back, what their story arc is, nothing. It's like they'll be back at some point to do something, and that's it. That's
like
all
they plan
is.
these like I played The Sims. Of like I like move a townie to another like, you know, plot of land, and then I'm like, oh, I'll run into her at some point.
Yeah, just some point. Yeah, and it's just like the story makes no sense. And if the character does come back, there's a chance that whatever they're doing is just like not satisfying at all, or it retcons what came before it, because apparently for some reason when it came to the second Doctor Strange movie, it was supposed to be a sequel to both Doctor Strange and WandaVision, but the screenwriter for Doctor Strange 2 did not watch WandaVision. So it like completely like undid whatever character arc she had in that show. And it's just like, what the it doesn't lead in like seamlessly into it, even though it's supposed to be a sequel. So it's just like if you structure it this way, and I also think it's a problem with like they're putting out way too much just stuff that it's impossible for them to like tell a cohesive story if you just don't map it out
So
properly.
you do believe in outlines. You do think that people should have outlines before they finish something.
I think if you're doing this shit, yeah. I think if you're in charge of like a big like universe and saga, I think it's very important that you should plan it out. Another issue I have with a certain other series, not to mention any names, cough cough, Star Wars.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't really like there's things about the sequels that like whatever is like a like I'm not a Star Wars lore head. Like I think that whatever serves the story is whatever serves the story. But like, you know, like the issue with the prequels is that George Lucas was so ambitious and no one was telling him no.
Yeah.
You know, whereas like there's alternately too many cooks in the kitchen on the sequels. And like I've heard, you know, it's probably one of these like, I think it might have been H-Bomber guy, you know, because I'm a lefty who has a YouTube account. Or it's one of these like other British fuckers who does these like 8-hour videos that I don't like. But like said that like basically J.J. Abrams did not like Star Wars. He liked his idea of Star Wars and he made that into Star Trek. And then when he actually had Star Wars in his hands, he did not know what to do with it because he didn't really like respect it for what it was. And to be clear, like Star Wars is really silly and ridiculous and it should be fun. I'm not suggesting that anyone needs to have utmost serious about any of these movies. Like that would be insane. That's not why I enjoy them. And like I also don't think that someone like, you know, people do this thing where they act like Dave Filoni is like the Messiah, and then they like try to sell him out to the Romans whenever they figure out that that's not true. Like he wasn't going to decanonize the sequels. And the thing is, like, I think Filoni, his success largely was that he did know how to plan and did know how to like fill in these gaps and create very cohesive arcs. But I think that like, you know, someone like J.J. Abrams is not necessarily doing that, and I get it. But that creates problems when you're trying to tell a cohesive trilogy. Even like the original trilogy is not the most like...
They have Luke kissing Leia in like Empire, and then the next movie it's just like, oh yeah, it's your sister. And it's, you know?
Yeah, like that's the nature of it.
Yeah, it's part of the fun. Incest is part of the fun. Really.
Incest is part of the fun. That's probably what the Donner Party said. But yeah, like I don't think that is the one thing about the Fallout show that I'm like, yeah, I'm glad they acknowledge the cousin fucking in the vaults because like obviously I'm from Utah. I've heard about these things. My great grandparents were cousins. Explains so much. No one lived in where are they even from? Emory County, Utah, in the 30s. But anyway, Star Wars. I think that to act like the original trilogy is some cohesive masterful storytelling is ridiculous. The prequels are arguably too planned, where like they're so dense because there's so much he wanted to do, and that creates like problems. Like Attack of the Clones is 2 movies in one, and one of them is considerably better than the other one. Like Obi-Wan being Dick Tracy is awesome. Whatever is happening, and like that's why I'm not ragging on like Anakin and Padme as characters. That's not the issue at all. It's not quite knowing what to do with them, and like. You know, Mark Hamill's been saying since the 70s that George Lucas can't write dialogue. So, you know, I'm glad that people have kind of come around to it not being Hayden Christensen's fault because it wasn't. But, that movie's not a good movie. I think it's fun because it's campy and silly and ridiculous. And, like, I'm also able to say that because I am removed from it and that's a product of my childhood. Whereas, like, the sequels I'm watching, like, I didn't watch the sequels until I watched the MCU movies because we had, like, a trial for Disney Plus, my roommate and I did.
Gotcha.
And so I'd never seen them. I didn't see them in theaters. I'm sure that if I'd, like a lot of my friends who saw The Force Awakens in theaters were like, oh yeah, that was a great experience, and then the rest of them didn't compare. I didn't even really like The Force Awakens that much. The only time I've ever done edibles in my life, because I don't smoke weed, is I took like a quarter of an edible to rewatch The Force Awakens to see if I would like it high, and instead I just kind of didn't have any depth perception, and I still didn't like the movie. And then I had to drive home. And I've never done edibles since.
You drove home while high?
No, I waited a while.
Okay, good,
yeah,
good,
I was
good.
like, because that's why I was like, I'm not gonna do much because I have to drive back. I was like visiting my family in Salt Lake, and so I was like, well, at some point I have to drive back to my mom's house, like 30 minutes away. No, I waited a while, and then I was like, yeah, this sucks. But anyway, like I think that like there's gonna be some like camp ridiculous factor to the sequels, but I think that what's fun about the prequels is they're so earnest.
Yeah.
Like George Lucas is being so sincere to a fault.
Almost, yeah, I was going to say to a fault, really.
The midichlorians.
The midichlorians.
When he explains it like it's like Thetans, Like, it's a Scientology thing, basically, of like, they're little organisms and you have more of them than Master Yoda. Like, it's dumb, but like, he had been thinking about that for years. And so, like, there's something about the sincerity of it, because this is his baby that he had too much creative control over.
Right.
It's like when Anne Rice was like, I don't need editors anymore. I've sold all these books. She needed editors. Rest in peace, but Anne Rice needed editors. And like, George Lucas needed people to tell him no, and that wasn't the case. Whereas like, with the Disney ones, I think it's that you have too many competing visions, which is just always going to be a problem. But then a lot of people who are not being super earnest about it.
Yeah.
And Star Wars is just like, that is the charm of it, is that it's painfully sincere, it's ridiculous, and it's like, it's nice because of that. You know what I mean? Like, the sequels feel very cynical to me.
I can see that. Yeah, as someone that kind of... No, I can't say that. As someone that likes one movie in the sequel trilogy, I can see where you're coming from.
Is it The Force Awakens?
No.
What is it?
The Last Jedi.
Which one is that one?
That's the second one.
What happens in that movie again?
What happens in that movie?
Is that the one where they like...
That's the one everyone hates.
The like MacGuffin hunt? I thought everyone hated the last one where Palpatine comes back.
They hate that one too, but they hate this one more.
Really?
Because that's the one where Luke is grumpy and living alone on like that island.
See, I don't find that objectionable.
Right.
Like, I think that's a thing that never bothered me.
Yeah.
It was like his, like, I feel I'm of two minds about it, right? Because like, logically, yes, if I were him, I would also probably be kind of a bastard. But with what we think are like the arc of Luke Skywalker is that we've thought for the past 50 years, that goes so contrary to it. I also see why, like, in isolation, it makes total sense, but in the grander scheme of what Star Wars is, I also kind of have an issue with it.
Right.
So, like, I don't know. That's my thing with the sequels is a lot of them, like, I don't have a problem with any individual, like, movie or beat. Some of them, like, are objectively, like, a bit silly. And I think there's a lot of wasted opportunities. Like,
oh, yes.
You know, Finn... Yeah. Like, I had assumed what these movies were about, like, when they first kind of got announced, was that he was a... defected clone trooper who becomes a Jedi. And I was like, that's fucking sick.
That's a good idea.
That's so cool, and that doesn't happen.
They made him a simp. That's all they did.
What who's he simping for again?
Rey.
I mean, I guess.
Yeah, that's what he did.
But she also doesn't have, like, I feel terrible for Daisy Ridley.
Oh, yeah.
Because she's very talented. I mean, like, I think that's always the case with, like, anything but the original Star Wars movies, that, like, these characters or these actors get fucked over for a while. And some of it's literally, like, life-ruining, like, with the kid who played Anakin in The Phantom Menace.
Yeah, I felt so bad for that kid, dude.
That's terrible. But, like, I also, like, obviously Daisy Ridley's not, like, quite in that position, but I hope that, she gets good opportunities her way, because what a wasted opportunity. Because one thing I do appreciate about Star Wars is that, like, even though you'll have, like, individual male fanboys who are obnoxious, there is a lot of, like, love for the female characters from the creative process, right? Like, obviously, like, when I rewatch the Clone Wars, I typically don't even watch season 1 because it's, like, it kind of takes a while to find its footing, and I'm like, everything really starts happening in season 2. But, like, yeah, Ahsoka Tano's really annoying at first, but she's also a child. And her arc is so compelling that she's a really beloved character. And, Leia also, the original has this, very particular arc. So, like, I think to give a character, this idea, like, in a universe that is quite genuinely, like, nuanced toward women in a way that was sort of period atypical, to then be like, well, we're going to make this contemporary. We're going to create this character who's not allowed to be a person. That's not being contemporary, because that's the thing is, like I said, in some ways Star Wars was very ahead of its time. So to say that, oh, well, they were so outdated, we're going to modernize it by not allowing her to be a flawed character is so reductive and regressive.
Yeah.
And then, like, also shafting John Boyega in the process, which creates, like, a whole intersectional identity around, like, white women and black men and, like, experiences of prejudice. But, like,
there's so many choices where it's just like, why? Yeah. Why?
Yeah, I wish those movies were brilliant. I genuinely wish that they were great. I don't want to hate these movies just because they didn't come out when I was a kid. You know what I mean? Like, I want to love.
That's how I feel.
Because, like, there's a lot of, like, the shows that, I think are great. Like, I did not catch up with The Mandalorian. I'm very behind. But, like, I really enjoyed The Mandalorian. I haven't watched Andor yet, but I've heard it's outstanding.
So good.
that's a contemporary property. I don't want that to be bad. I'm thrilled that it's great. You know what I mean? So like,
Yeah.
I don't have any hate on the fact that like they're just making Star Wars media. Like that's I love Star Wars. This is not bad news for me. But I do think that like you were saying, having this like very uneven quality and just kind of throwing things out there.
Yeah.
And not really caring what that means for your, like, basically like robbing Peter to pay Paul. Like, I'm going to create this story decision now to bail me out of this issue that I have right now. And then I guess down the road, that's going to be an even bigger problem because I never actually addressed it directly.
Yeah. That just reminded me, there's like something in The Force Awakens that they said they were going to expand on in later movies, and they didn't. And instead, they just made a comic book about how something happened. I forget what exactly it was. But I was just like, what the fuck? Why are you setting up like all of these things? You don't have an idea of where it's going. At that point, just don't set it up. You
That's
don't have
the
to.
thing.
You should focus on the now. And then like if you have a really solid plan of where things are going, then okay, you can like include setups for that. But don't like just be like, we'll find out as time goes on.
That's not even how improv works.
That's how you shouldn't improv a whole movie though.
No,
like, that's
and
an awful idea.
Good improv has structure.
Yeah.
Like the prequels are so ridiculously dense. Like we were saying that like like the Phantom Menace is so convoluted. And like every time I watch it and I'm reading the opening scroll, I'm like, what the fuck is going on? Like there's the Trade Federation that's trying to basically occupy Naboo.
Right.
But then like we have to understand this pre-existing trade agreement that would allow this to happen, and then the Jedi to have to come and bail them out. You kind of can't even pay attention to what the context is because you'll just have to figure out what's going on. And then so much of the movie is like I disagree with people who are like, why do we have all this background knowledge and we spend half the movie on Tatooine? That's the point, is that we spend half the movie on fucking Tatooine because they have to get their way out of this because the Republic is non-functional. Of course it makes sense that we're on Tatooine and seeing how things actually work.
Yeah.
That's not a failure of screenwriting. People who say that are crazy. But like, that movie's so convoluted. Attack of the Clones has too much going on. And they don't integrate well enough. But Revenge of the Sith is a great movie. And a lot of why is because all of these things get paid off. And I acknowledge that it's easier because they're a prequel trilogy. We have a point that they're going to, right? As opposed to the sequels, which are creating new lore and also have to resolve new lore.
Right.
But they do resolve, right? Like they are functional as 3 movies that even if, say, the original trilogy didn't exist, you can still watch those in isolation and have a complete narrative arc of like failed space Jesus.
That is true. They did at least try to tell a cohesive story.
There's better ways to do a lot of it.
Yeah, I was gonna say like there's much better ways you can go about it, but like at least you can watch it and it's like, okay, it makes sense. Kind of.
I watch the prequels as like a trilogy a lot, and just, like I'll watch I'll rewatch the Clone Wars, and then I'll watch Revenge of the Sith. So like a lot of the time I'm really not watching. I'm not watching 6 movies at a time. I'm just not gonna do it unless you're me in lockdown being furloughed from Kohl's and you've nothing else to do because it's Reno and there's nothing to do anyway. But like other than that, me in my normal life, now that I can go outside, I don't tend to watch all 6 of them. So like, but I find it satisfying to do it that way. I'm perfectly content to do it that way.
Right.
I watched all the sequels. Like, so the way that we did it was that my roommate at the time had never seen the prequels. And he was like, these are terrible. And I was like, they are. They're not great movies. But then we watched the original trilogy and, it was great. And then we were like, let's watch the sequels because we've never seen these. And we were like, oh, these are like functionally on a storytelling level worse than the prequels. As someone that likes one of these movies, I like how you say that like it's this guilty confession.
It kind of is. On the internet, it kind of is.
I guess that is like saying that you love Attack of the Clones.
Yeah. Before I was someone that enjoyed the sequel trilogy, but then the more I rewatched The Force Awakens like a couple years ago, and I was like, this is not good.
How old were you when those movies came out?
When did they come out? I don't know. I was
in Force Awakens was like 2016 or something?
Probably like in middle school.
Okay, so you were a kid at the time.
Yeah. But at that point, I'd already seen all the other ones. I'd already kind of grown up with...
Oh, your culture.
Yeah. So I did enjoy The Force Awakens when it did come out, but I'm not entirely sure if that's just because of the movie itself or it's because of like the experience of like seeing that in like a theater and that how that sort of changed it.
Yeah, like Star Wars is coming back. It's a cinematic experience.
Everyone was gonna love it regardless of the quality just because of that idea. It's like everyone was just so hyped for it that in no one's mind it could be bad. No one thought it could be bad. So
like I have this Vanity Fair magazine from 1998 that was like kind of announcing like the behind the scenes of the Phantom Menace, which hadn't come out yet. Mm-hmm. My friend found this in a garbage can in Oakland, and it's the nicest thing anyone's ever given me. And like it's so funny to see the tone that these like articles are written in. Mm-hmm. Don't choke and die.
Yeah.
Force chokes you on your hydro flask. But like, you know, seeing the tone of it of like Star Wars is coming back and even this like clunky ass language, like they're like this mysterious Darth Maul who is a dark Jedi. And I was like, we know what the Sith are. Like that's not new lore that this movie came up with. But still like people are so excited. Even like as Vanity Fair is describing Jar Jar Binks, it's like this huge like, oh my God, it's this great thing. So like that's just the nature of it. Like that whenever something like this comes back, it's such a huge deal.
Yeah.
And to be fair, people like hated the prequels as much as the sequels. The difference is that people that were kids when the prequels came out have grown up. Mm-hmm. And so they are not in that original crowd. But like if I talk to my like, you know, my like aunts about the like prequels, they're like, those movies are dog shit. The only movie that I like is A New Hope. You know, so like it is generational, but like that's another thing. It's like so hard to like separate your experience of art from like your context of viewing.
Yeah.
So, like, I criticize the sequels, but maybe if I'd have grown up with them, I would have absolutely loved them. Same thing if I'd have grown up with these MCU movies. Like, and I've seen that happen, like, in, like, you know, like, classmates who I think are younger than me and normally were the same age. But again, like, I was watching MASH on KSL reruns because no one told me what a movie was. No one told me what a child's media was. But, like, you know, I talked to them and like for them, like the Iron Man movies are this huge foundational experience that they can't even like criticize the MCU because it's so formative to their love of cinema. Right. Same way, like I'm defensive of like Velvet Goldmine, and some of it's I think it has artistic merit, but then some of it's that's you know 12-year-old me is going, oh my God, this is the most important movie ever, and I have to negotiate that through me 10 years later, right? And like. I try to be sensitive to that and to not like criticize people for like having what I think is bad taste because we're
same.
In a different context. But
I criticize my own taste all the time. Like
you have to.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't know if you've ever been asked this, and if so, I kind of want to hear your thoughts on this. Okay. But I have been asked a lot, did getting a film education make it worse for you to watch movies? And I've always said no, that I love movies even more now that I have this new sense of literacy. Yeah. And that I should still, again, like I think especially when you're younger, you identify yourself so heavily with your taste. And some of this is like social media, right? Like I've never been on Twitter, but like Twitter character limit for a long time, like you became identified with your opinions. And if your opinions create engagement, then you've done the internet. Well, congratulations, upvote. But then like with Letterboxd, like I always complain, my like really boomer stance is I hate Letterboxd. And I use it to document sometimes what movies I've watched, but I've never written a review on Letterboxd. Oh, okay. And I don't even like my friends writing reviews on Letterboxd a lot of the time because I think that the nature of it is it's a Twitter style competition to see who can be the most cynical and quippy. Right. And I heavily dislike that because like, yes, I am a cynical and quippy person. Reddit atheist, like that's like the how I came up. I think that that's such an awful way to watch and evaluate movies. Yeah. And so like people saying, oh, well now you have these newfound like understandings of what maybe works and what doesn't. Do you hate movies now? Why would I ever hate something because I've learned more about it? Exactly.
As someone that does movie reviews on YouTube, I fucking hate when people make like these quippy like reviews of it because that's not helpful or like it doesn't analyze anything.
The CinemaSinsification.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the issue. It's like you should be able to like articulate what exactly worked for you, what exactly didn't work for you in a way that's. I'm not saying you can't be funny or like entertaining, but like at least have some like genuine like thoughts put in there that's not like, oh, I just want to get the most likes for this thing. Like,
don't be so like self-motivated and self-interested. Like, I think a lot of people get into film, even as filmmakers, very selfishly.
Right.
In that there's social cachet, particularly if you are like a white straight man or whatever, of saying you're a filmmaker, because it's accessible enough art that people will recognize it without you seeming pretentious, but you are still allowed to be pretentious about it.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people who make films do it selfishly, but then a lot of people review them selfishly. Like, you get this, like, you know, like the nostalgia critic or whatever. I don't know if that's like I don't know if anyone knows that reference anymore.
I hope they know that reference.
I hope they do, unfortunately. But yeah, like the idea of like, I don't like this movie, I like what this movie can do for me is appalling.
And
it's become the normative way that we interact with film online.
Mm-hmm. I hate to end it on that note, but we are literally like running out of time.
We are.
Yeah, I just remembered that we have to be out of here by like 3, and it's currently 2:57.
I must be lonely.
Do you have any final thoughts, anything you want to promote from yourself?
No. Be sincere all of the time, be self-critical, and steal.
Yeah, pirate. Mm-hmm. Go on the Pirates Bay and everything.
They shut down the Pirates Bay.
They did?
Yeah, because the guy went to prison for being a piece of shit for unrelated reasons, if I recall.
Oh, don't go on the Pirates Bay.
Do other things. Use the Tor browser. It's great.
Yeah. Everything we said in this podcast was us gaslighting you, as we said up front. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. You learned nothing about us. And if anything, I hope you learned less about the two of us by watching this. Yeah. All right. Fuck off.